Hello and welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. Now in its sixth year, nearly 500 episodes taped, about 430 or so released, where every Tuesday and Friday, I am privileged on behalf of Franklin Covey to interview some of the world's most renowned luminaries, thought leaders, authors, creators, artists, physicians, celebrities, actors, entrepreneurs, CEOs, leaders of all levels in organizations, families, and life, because the intention of this podcast and Franklin Covey is to make you a better leader, formally or informally, built on the heels of our co-founder, Stephen R. Covey, who of course wrote this seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, arguably the best-selling personal leadership book of all time. This podcast is meant to invest in you. And today we have Dave Asprey. He is the creator and founder of Bulletproof Coffee and the founder of the Bulletproof Company. He hosts a top-rated podcast, The Human Upgrade, and is a New York Times best-selling author. Today we're going to talk primarily about the insights in his recent release, Smarter, Not Harder, the Biohacker's Guide to Getting the Body and Mind You Want. Dave Asprey, welcome to On Leadership.
Scott, it's an honor to be here with you today.
Well, that feeling is mutual, Dave. We've been chasing you for a while. Glad to have you in the mix. Appreciate you taking 35 minutes to invest in our global audience who doesn't want to be smarter and not work harder, although I think working hard is still a valuable component of people's success, certainly common to all those that we've had here on this podcast. Dave, I'd love it if you'd take a couple of minutes and indulge me and our listeners. We rewind a couple of decades and talk about who you are, where you've been, and how you got to where you are now.
In my early 20s, I hit 300 pounds, and I had really serious brain fog as my career as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley was taking off. I made $6 million when I was 26 at the company that created web hosting. We held Google's first servers when it was 2 guys and 2 computers, and when the Facebook was just 6 or 7 computers. So completely different world back then. So I cut my teeth in Silicon Valley as an entrepreneur while my health was falling apart. I met a group of people 3 times my age who were running one of the first longevity groups in the world. And I became a member, and they asked me to be president. So here I am learning all the tricks that became the biohacking movement from people who helped me turn my brain back on, helped me lose 100 pounds, and helped me understand how biology really works, how to increase your IQ, how to change your brain. And when I started what became Bulletproof, Bulletproof did about $750 million in lifetime revenue when I was running it, and I'm no longer associated with Bulletproof. But during that time, this idea of biohacking is something I brought into the world. It was a blog post, and it became a new word in the English language about 6 years later. So my name is in Webster's dictionary. And biohacking is the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside of you so you have control of your own biology. And it took off because no one had ever written a book for us as entrepreneurs, as business people, and even as engineers. So when I started writing blog posts and content saying, here's what's going on for business people and executives, here's our kind of stress, and here are the levers and dials and knobs you can pull for your biology, same as you would in your business. It was revolutionary, and it pissed off a few people. But as time will tell, biohacking is a global movement. I just saw an industry report says by 2031, they're expecting $89 billion is the valuation of the total biohacking market. Today, it's about $16 billion, and it was started with a blog post in 2011.
Steve, as I mentioned in our opening 40 years ago, Dr. Covey wrote this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit 7 was sharpen your saw, kind of a novel idea at the time. The idea of sharpening your saw was focused on 4 dimensions: social, emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical. And so for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk a lot about sharpening your saw, and if you will, in the physical realm as it relates to habit 7. I've read your book, Smarter, Not Harder. By the way, your previous book was a New York Times bestseller known as The Bulletproof Diet. I have 7 or 8 questions I want to build our conversation around today, kind of throughout your book. The first is you make an interesting statement and you say, our body makes decisions before our brains do. And that's a little bit counterintuitive to maybe what a lot of neuroscientists might say, or at least I've interviewed. But would you take that idea that the body makes decisions before our brain does and kind of just riff on that?
Yes. And I'm not just saying this. I run a neuroscience company, and I have for 10 years, called 40 Years of Zen, where thousands of entrepreneurs have come through and spent 5 days upgrading their brains. And this is what I've done for my own brain. And it's a very profound neuroscience and personal development practice. And what happens is, if I say clap my hands, everyone listening knows that it took a little while for the sound to make it through the system and then from the speakers to the ears, and then we heard it. But that's not what really happens. Because if we put electrodes on your head and we're measuring your auditory cortex, your body holds onto that signal for 1/3 of a second and then allows your brain to get the signal. So there's a lag time on reality. And that is the time that the body is fully in charge. And we've all seen this. If you ever lean on a hot stove and look down and say, oh, it's hot, I guess I should move my hand. No, your hand would be blistered. So instead you jerk your hand away, or more accurately, your body jerks your hand away and you take credit for it. So there is a hidden system that is designed to keep your meat safe. I call it your meat operating system. And that system is where triggers reside. It takes a huge amount of energy. And if you're running your company and an employee or a board member comes in and says something that just gets under your skin, that's what creates the emotion that then gets fed into your brain. And then your brain thinks the emotion is reality. And then you act on it and you become reactive and you don't show up the way you wanted to show up or that was good for your business. So understanding there's a secondary system that's designed to be invisible that pre-processes reality for you, that can change everything about how you judge the voice in your head, how you judge your behaviors. And you can recontextualize all of the things you've done that you're ashamed of as being survival behaviors from your body's very dumb and very fast protection systems, and that you can change those systems.
You are a very credible, what I might call iconoclast. You have a lot of counterpoints, countertypes to what might be some conventional wisdom. You also write in the book that people are inherently lazy. I actually think you fine-tuned that to say our bodies are inherently lazy. Expand on that. And why is that important to know? And then what should we do once we recognize that there's truth in that?
Well, all life on Earth follows a basic set of rules. This is long before your brain does anything. And these are F words. And this is where laziness comes from. So a certain amount of energy is available every day or every second. And it gets allocated. Number one is something scary. This is fear. So that has to happen now, because if it's a tiger, then you have to react. So fear first, then eat everything, because famine is second. And then after that, fertility. So all life processes reality before you can think, is it scary? Can I eat it? And can I reproduce with it? Because those are the core behaviors of life. Everything you've ever done that you're ashamed of came from mitochondrial behaviors that support life. And the thing that is rejuvenating and restoring and gives me hope in this is the next thing that all life does is friend. You take care of your species and those around you. And the final thing that all life does, in humans, I call it forgiveness, but it's evolution. So your energy will go into those things. And because energy is limited in all life, life evolves to use as little energy as possible, because it never knows if there's another meal coming or you're going to have to run away from a tiger. And what this means for us as entrepreneurs is that you wake up in the morning and your logical brain says, I want to go to the gym because I know it's good for me. But you have a feeling in your body when your body looks at the warm bed and a croissant and a lazy day, and you feel a desire for the lazy day and a logical decision to go to the gym. The fact that you don't want to go to the gym makes you think you're crazy, and people are ashamed. Well, I should want to go to the gym. Why don't I want to go to the gym? You don't want to go to the gym because your body is lazy and your mind can work hard. And understanding this is just an innate behavior in all life. Well, maybe we should hack that behavior so it takes less willpower to go to the gym. And the point of Smarter Not Harder is just Working hard is a terrible sin unless you're working with the most efficient, effective tools available. Otherwise, why would you drive to work when you could walk to work carrying a heavy backpack? Because it's more work. So there's no inherent goodness in working hard unless you are armed with something that works really well. Unfortunately, for most of us, we kind of get stuck this way. I work so hard, I should get results. There's no evidence that working hard gets results. There's evidence that having the right tools gets results, and you get better results by having the right tools and working hard. So the ability to work hard, but no putting working hard on a pedestal. I would prefer to run my companies in 1 minute a week. I haven't figured out how yet, but if I do figure it out, I'm going to do it.
Dave, extrapolating out of that, are you suggesting that it's important for us to know that in many cases, it's not our minds telling our bodies what to do, it's our bodies telling our minds what to do, and the quicker we can own that, we can reconcile the two?
The body tells the mind how to feel. The mind makes up a story about the feeling and does something. Do you see the difference?
I do, beautifully said.
Yeah.
You are maybe a bit of an outlier. I've already called you an iconoclast, a credible iconoclast, but you're also a bit of an outlier. You have, I'm guessing, are a very disciplined person, disciplined thought, disciplined mind, disciplined actions. You mentioned in the book that you've trained your body in certain areas to respond or lead your life in certain ways. Talk about, it wasn't always the case. You were very vulnerable in the beginning about your weight and your own mental, your own physical health. What have you done that's replicable, that's relatable, that millions of people can actually maybe begin thinking about when they read your book of how you've trained your body?
So I'm not as disciplined as people think I am, believe it or not. What I have done is what was necessary given how really bad my body was. The 300-pound thing was part of it, but the cognitive dysfunction, the chronic fatigue syndrome, and I had Asperger's syndrome as a young man. And I say had because you can fix it. I also had ADHD, and most great entrepreneurs have ADHD. It's very, very common. So understanding that my movement patterns, the way my eyes worked, the way my ears worked, I had to reprogram all those. But most of us don't have to go to that level. But because I did, I learned some things that I can share. And one of the things you understand is that your body has a stress response that gets triggered all the time. And I've worked with thousands of entrepreneurs on this. One of my favorite stories is a hedge fund manager who got a little device called Inner Balance that clips to your ear and shows you when your body goes into fight or flight. And it happens for most of us hundreds of times a day, and there's no visible signal. Well, when you play a little video game on your phone that measures the way your heartbeat changes on a second-by-second basis, you realize you can feel it when your body does this. So this hedge fund manager calls and says, I thought you were full of crap. I did it for 6 weeks, and I feel so much better. I'm in the green zone. My fight or flight response isn't being triggered. So then he goes into the office, puts the clip on his ear, and the market bell to open the market rings. And he goes into full fight or flight mode. And he said, Dave, I was in fight or flight for 8 hours, and I've traded for 20 years of my life, always in a state of fear. It took me another 6 weeks to train my nervous system to be relaxed. I'm trading better, and when I come home, I want to play with my kids. So what I'm proposing to you is that there's an invisible part of you that's looking for threats in the world around you that are not real threats, that's stealing your energy, stealing your focus, and making you act like a jerk. And this is something you can train. One of the easiest things to do is to learn breathwork, which is totally free. You could buy that Inner Balance sensor I'm talking about. I don't work with that company. I was an advisor more than a decade ago, but it's just a cool piece of tech. And the idea here is, what would happen if I was aware of what my body did when I wasn't looking, and I helped my body know what to do better? And there are countless things in the book. One of the biggest things you can do, teach your body to be better at making electricity. More electricity, more mitochondrial function directly translates to more willpower. And I have multiple studies supporting that from different areas of science. So training your body to get better sleep is an easy thing to do. Training your body to have a higher VO2 max or to be more cardiovascularly fit Look, I'm not going to spend 8 hours a week going for a run or something. That sounds like hell. And then I wouldn't be with my family. I wouldn't be with my companies. But I can do it in 15 minutes a week. So Smarter Not Harder is a book. How do you save a ton of time and not do the things you think it takes to get results in your body?
One of my favorite lines in the book is the following. Your meat OS, I'm going to have you remind us what that means. Your meat OS does a terrible job of distinguishing a bad breakup from a tiger and will turn on your stress response either way. That probably is like the theme of my life. Remind us what your meat OS is, not a phrase anyone's ever used, and then maybe you could tease out some of the things that Scott Miller and millions of others can do to distinguish between an insult and being chased by a tiger.
Your meat operating system is another word for your ego. And the ego's job and the meat operating system's job is to keep the body alive as if you weren't in there. In fact, it doesn't even like it that you're in there. And this works well because animals who don't have a lot of cognitive processing, their bodies somehow work, and our bodies work when we're not paying attention. We breathe, our heart beats. This is a necessary system. But it's so terrified of starving, and it's so terrified of threats that it will make you think about things you don't want. For instance, the average person, 1/3 of your thoughts every day are about tacos. Well, more accurately, what am I going to eat at my next meal? Because it's so obsessed about food. One of the things that will bring you great peace and more willpower is to learn how to do intermittent fasting. And this is go 18 hours a day, every now and then, doesn't have to be every day, without food. Have an earlier dinner and a later breakfast. When you do that, there'll be a voice in your head that says, I'm starving, I'm going to die. Now, your brain knows you won't starve for 60 days without eating, but your body thinks you'll starve if you don't eat in the next hour. So you can train the body to be calm, and soon the amount of energy that goes into thinking about food goes away. And when it comes to things like fear, I had a bad breakup, there's a whole bunch of hidden stuff in there. And when you read Smarter Not Harder, I talk about various ways to get inside the system. And the first and most important thing to do is understand the power of breath. So if you're feeling, what I'm going to say is triggered, or you're feeling dysregulated, okay, you got in a fight with your spouse, someone cut you off in traffic and it's stuck. You want to be able to reset the state of your biology most quickly. And this is what Navy SEALs do for that. It's called a box breath. And you breathe in for 4 seconds through the nose. You hold your breath for 4 seconds. You breathe out slowly for 4 seconds. And you hold your breath empty for 4 seconds. And if you do this for about 4 breaths, your entire state of your nervous system will shift. And all of a sudden, you're calmer. And what creates a lot of confusion and oftentimes shame and guilt is when we know one thing, and that's probably real, and we feel another. And it creates like a chaotic schism. Because, well, am I crazy? No. It's that your body is a separate consciousness. It's very fast and very dumb. And your mind knows context, but it's very slow. And the body will feed emotions into the mind, and you will believe that those are a representation of reality. For instance, someone cuts you off in traffic. The story that's going to come to you is that person thinks they're better than me, they think that I'm unimportant, or whatever your inner dialogue is like that. The reality is that person could be on the way to the hospital to deliver their first baby. You just don't know anything, but the story, because the emotion was there, the story is always a negative one. And when you understand that that's how the system works, you can ask yourself this simple question: is it real? And you realize a lot of the stuff that your logical mind believes based on an emotional input from your operating system, it's not real at all. It was just a story. And that allows you to pilot your company in a better way.
I think you misspoke earlier. You said that we spend 1/3 of our time thinking about food. I think it's 3/3, because my entire day is thinking about my next meal, which is kind of a paradox because, I mean, look at me. I'm 6'1" and I weigh $175 after a shower wet after pot roast. And so I'm always thinking about food. I kind of live to eat. In fact, it's a reward system for myself, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner is my reward system for surviving 3 sons and staying married and paying the power bill. And I wonder how much I have that wrong, that I sort of live to eat because it's a reward system for me for doing a good job that day, not getting arrested, not murdering someone. That's a joke. But I think that's truth. There's truth in that. What would, not having met me before, what's something that I could do who actually sees food as a reward system, as a pleasure, moment of my day, because clearly my body is running my body, and my need for food, my perceived need for food, is running my life. I mean, obviously I'm not overweight, I'm fairly fit, I'm decently healthy, but it does kind of consume my thoughts, I'll tell you that. I'm always thinking about what my next meal is.
Well, there's a direction for that. I would
It's called
first
psychotherapy.
well, it's probably more something like EMDR, but someone at some point, it's very common in many different cultures, you learned before your brain was really in there that food is a reward. So you did good, here, have a lollipop, right? And we teach our kids that. And then we learn to get a dopamine response from it.
Yeah.
And dopamine is what powers entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that rewards you with pleasure from pursuing something, even though you don't get the reward when you actually get it. It's a bit mean that way. So there's a dopamine reward from food. So what you do is you say, all right, I'm going to fast. And I'm going to fast for a day. In my case, I knew that I had some of the food reward. I knew that I ate when I was lonely. And I knew that if I didn't eat 6 meals a day, I would go into starvation mode. I believe this, it's nonsense. So I hired a shaman to drop me off in a cave for 4 days with no food and no people, so I could be hypoglycemic and hangry. And my book, Fast This Way, is based on that journey. But the point here is, how do you go without food for a few days, which is not going to kill you in the slightest? And how do you face the inner voice? And then how do you reward yourself when there isn't food? And that shifted for me my entire perspective, because I thought I would be, on a hospital bed, I would be feeling so crappy, I'd be unable to move. After 4 days of not eating all by myself, I walked 10 miles and climbed a mountain with only water in my stomach to go meet the shaman, and I could have gone for days. It was incredible. So the story about I need the food, I'm just making everything, this is all made up by your operating system to make sure you eat enough. And you can replace that reward with whatever you want. And yeah, maybe there's a little psychotherapy in there, but it's not talk therapy. It's either EMDR or it's a program like 40 Years of Zen, where you go really deep on the neuroscience and you actually rewrite what's in your operating system. I like to think of it like you have your phone, and your phone has all these alerts that pop up on the screen all the time. Well, you can't use your phone if that happens, so you turn off all the alerts. Well, who went through and turned off all the alerts in your nervous system, in your operating system? So you have an alert, need to eat, need to eat. It's not real. You don't need to eat right now. You don't need to eat for a day, but the alert's constantly flashing and you can't think. And then you get one, someone's criticizing you, someone's criticizing you. I'm not going to have enough. I am not enough. All the old trauma things, a lot of what you'll find in Stephen Covey's work. So what do you do to make it so instead of doing what the Buddhists do, take a deep breath, notice the feelings, allow them to wash through you? I don't think that entrepreneurs today have time to sit there and notice inappropriate, useless alerts coming through all the time and push those to the side so we can just be present. It takes too much energy. What I think we can do, and what I have done, and what I teach people to do, is let's turn off the alerts. So I don't have to allow them to flow through. I don't have to set them aside and stay focused. I can just stay focused because I have fewer alerts going on. And my whole practice here is give the body and the brain more energy and use less energy on inappropriate alerts. And the section in Smarter, Not Harder that talks about the brain is where I go deep on that. And the book that comes out next year, I go really deep on it.
I want to be your friend, but I think it will be hard for us to be friends because my standard might need to be raised. And I've got a pretty high standard in life. Dave, let's talk about...
I would cook you a steak. And one thing that I have to add to this.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Most people who are constantly thinking about food, it's because you did a bad job in your last meal. If you eat the wrong food that you think is healthy and you're hungry an hour or two later, it's because your last meal didn't satisfy you. If you select the right foods, you will not think about food one time for 4 hours.
Whoa, wait. Are you suggesting that Cracker Barrel is in fact not my best friend?
You know, it may not be. I'm suggesting that if you were to eat enough animal protein, say a pound of grass-fed ribeye and some vegetables, that you wouldn't think about food for a long time. And if you eat something like a salad is the worst meal ever. There's very few calories in it. There's lots of plant toxins, and there probably wasn't enough protein. If you would have said, how much do you weigh? 175, you need 175 grams of animal protein per day. Every entrepreneur listening, 1 gram of animal protein per pound of body weight. Do that for 2 weeks. Has the same effect on your body as taking Ozempic. Your brain becomes focused, your blood sugar becomes level, and the part of your body that's constantly craving because you don't have enough building blocks to maintain your protein, it shuts up. And you just don't think about food.
I think what I heard you just say is, Scott, not only could you save $75 a day on breakfast, lunch, and dinner eating out, but that I could transform my relationships, my mood, my focus, my finances, my longevity by actually following some of the insights in Smarter, Not Harder. Let's talk.
Just some, not all. Just to be clear, there's more in there than you're going to do. Pick 4 things that resonate, and you'll have so much more energy that you'll probably pick 4 more. That's how you do it.
I think that is exactly right. Let's talk about a couple of those. You write about the connection between our genetics and our food choices. You kind of started to allude to that. Would you riff on that? I am, after 700 interviews across the multiple podcasts that I've hosted in the iHeartRadio program, interviewed a lot of people. And the 2 topics that I'm kind of obsessed with right now are epigenetics and our origin stories, why we do what we do based on what we were imprinted by our parents and our headmasters and all that. Give us a little bit of a masterclass on the connection between our genetic makeup and our daily food choices. This is especially interesting to me.
I would love to tell you that eat right for your blood type was valid. It doesn't work. No longevity doctor I've worked with has ever supported that. And I've interviewed 1,200 of that kind of person on my podcast. Like that, I've gone very deep on this for 25 years. But what is true is that most plants will kill you. If you went outside into your backyard and just randomly ate some plants that weren't food plants, you are probably going to be in the hospital or very, very sick. So we know plants make toxins. And there's no reason to believe that all the foods we can eat have an equal amount of benefit or risk. Turns out that a lot of the foods that are now considered superfoods contain meaningful amounts of plant toxins. And you might handle those plant toxins reasonably well if your ancestors have been eating it for thousands of years. Things like lentils and beans contain large amounts of a toxin called lectin. Even the nightshade family, which is peppers, tomatoes, potatoes. Those are New World things that were invented in Peru and then exported to Europe. So if your ancestors have been eating those for a long time, that's great. You probably can handle them. But if you're Northern European genetic, where grain doesn't even grow up there, these people eat, cows and seal blubber. This is historically. What you end up with is some foods that some humans can digest, especially in times of famine, are not going to be compatible with your biology. Everyone has some kryptonite foods and some foods that really nourish you. And if you're saying, what did my great-great-grandparents eat? That's probably a hint of what is going to be most compatible with you. And this idea that today I'm going to have Thai food, tomorrow I'm going to have Indian food, the next day I'm going to have Mexican food, after that I'll have some American food. Your body doesn't know what to do with it, and it was not designed genetically to handle that. And there's about 5 types of plant toxins that you have to watch out for, and understand if every time you eat that, you wake up with pimples and a bloated stomach, don't eat it anymore. Just be curious.
All right, so I'm going to go 2 areas with this. You have a great story in the book about you being raised, I think, in New Mexico and some peppers. I want to have you recreate that. But I think, are you kind of saying that everyone should do like a genetic test, whatever it's called, 23andMe, and understand your background? Am I 80% Irish? And maybe look at what kind of foods those in? I mean, how do you practically build a bridge on that for me?
It's a little harder because if you do a 23andMe, you realize, I have 7 generations ago, I have one full-blooded indigenous Native American,
Yeah.
right? But I wouldn't say that genetically. How do I know? Does that mean I should be eating whatever he ate? It's unknown. So what you can do is you can take a test called Viome, Viome, and Viome will look at what is your body actually doing with the genetics you have. What's it creating? What's it not creating? And they'll suggest foods that work for you and don't work for you. And very recently, they found 58% of people really benefit from eating beef, right? And some people, it's less of a superfood than it is for others. So understanding you have some plant toxins you probably eat every day. The most common one is gluten, beans, lectins from nightshades. These are issues. And another thing is that all the superfoods that no one ate until the last 20 years, like kale, even spinach, beets, these contain high amounts of a toxin that causes razor sharp crystals to form inside your body that contribute to aging. So understanding plants are not good just because they're plants. The lowest toxin foods out there are grass-fed animals, and the highest toxin foods are plants. Some plants are good for you. Not all plants are good for you. And loading up on the biggest, most rough plants is probably not good for your health.
I'm riveted. My wife is going to be riveted with your book too. Will you just tell you kind of did, but you tell the story about your own upbringing in New Mexico and some of the plants you would eat and what you learned from that, because whether that relates to me or not, and it doesn't, it certainly is metaphorically insightful for me to be thinking about what I should and should not be eating for my own genetic type.
It's a really good indicator. Okay, I grew up in New Mexico, and their green chili is a native food. It's my soul food. I love green chili. I've had arthritis in my knees since I was 14 and in a lot of the rest of my body. I don't have it anymore. But what was going on? It turns out that my family with Northern European genetics has a lot of sensitivity to that specific kind of plant toxin. Not the spicy part of the chili, but to a defense compound found inside the plant called a lectin. And when I quit eating those, all of my body pain went away. But it wasn't just don't eat green chili. It was don't eat any member of the pepper family or others related to it, in this case, potatoes, as well as eggplants. Those all live in the deadly nightshade family. So I told my father this. I said, look, this is genetic. And of course, as any entrepreneur knows, your parents probably aren't going to listen to you. And 5 years later, he said, I finally tried what you said. I don't think I'm going to have to replace my other hip. It's that big of a difference. It can be night and day. But if you're eating, I had some chili flakes on this and I had some bell peppers over here, you'll never know because it's always present in your diet. And this is why I recommend for 2 weeks, go on a very limited diet and see what changes in your life. And my book, The Bulletproof Diet, I explain how to do that. And it doesn't have to be that limited, but just eat some steak and some salt and 2 kinds of veggies and some rice. And if that's all you eat for even a few days and everything in your life changes for the better, there's some kryptonite in the rest of your food, and then you go on a quest to find it, or you could run that Viome test.
Dave, this is a bit of a left turn, but I remember reading in the book, you opined on vitamin E in particular, and I thought that was interesting in terms of, how we get it. Do we have enough, not enough, too much? Talk about that.
In the book, I talk about vitamin DAKE, which is a mix of vitamin D, A, K, and E. And vitamindake.com has the ratios I was talking about. And I talk specifically about vitamin E. There's synthetic vitamin E that most people get and most of us take that actually increases your risk of a lot of diseases. And then there's natural vitamin E that's derived from annatto that has different fractions in it that you can't get from the synthetic stuff. And that's really good for you. The more you've been enjoying restaurant food, the more you've been eating seed oils, the more vitamin E your body needs. And you need a little bit of vitamin E, the good kind, to help protect the membranes in your cells. But what works best is that mixture of vitamin D3, vitamin K2, reformed vitamin A, mixed with vitamin E, which is why vitamin DAKE is the thing that I'm recommending in the book. Those will guide minerals to go to the right parts of your cells. And what's happening in entrepreneurs and in people and in people today is we don't have enough minerals. So our cells can't do what we want them to do. You lifted weights, you wanted to put on muscle, but you couldn't put on muscle because you were lacking zinc. So getting a broad spectrum of minerals and your fat-soluble vitamins today at the same time gives your body the ability to respond to the environment so you can improve. It'll affect your brain and thousands of systems in the body. It's one of the cheapest and most effective supplements you can do.
Let's end on this. You are enormously credible and also overwhelming for the normal person, high-functioning, high-performing person, even like me. To your point, pick 4, do those, add 4, do those. This is probably a question you get on every podcast you're on, but it's okay, because there's a couple million people that are on this podcast that were on the last podcast. I'm leaving here. I'm going to go to lunch. I'm not going to Cracker Barrel, thanks to you, even though that's my weekly therapy. What's today? What day is today? It's a pot roast day? Could be.
Thursday, I think.
I don't know. Chicken pot pie, maybe. What are some couple practical things to say, hey, before you get overwhelmed, go try to do these 2 or 3 things, because it's going to be helpful in terms of your awareness, your understanding, the intimacy with how your body works with your mind. Give us a couple of good, valuable Dave-isms.
All right. Number 1, if you're feeling overwhelmed about how to manage your body, do you feel the same overwhelm about how you manage your business? And I'm guessing not, because you're an entrepreneur, which can be overwhelming, but you put systems in place. And I want you to think about putting systems in place and even hiring the right experts for your biology, the same way you would hire a marketing expert or a finance expert for your company when you need it. It's just having a team to run your hardware the right way. And that said, the easiest thing you could do to improve your performance and your presence is learn how to sleep. Most entrepreneurs don't sleep well because our minds ruminate and we're not setting up our environment for sleep. So tonight, look at your curtains. If you can see any light around your curtains, there's a study that shows the amount of light that comes around curtains from streetlights increases depression by 69%. So buy yourself some blackout curtains. Buy yourself some dimmer switches or some red night lights. Have some darkness at night. Tape over every LED light source in your bedroom and sleep in pitch dark and watch what happens when you wake up the next morning. And because in your business, you track what you're doing, buy a sleep tracker or a fitness tracker and actually use it. The most important measure of whether you did everything right for your biology the day before is your morning readiness score. Did your body recover while you were asleep? How well did it do that? And if you have that signal, then you'll know I did something that worked or didn't work last night. What was it? And you can continuously improve without being overwhelmed. Track it to hack it.
Dave Asprey, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Bulletproof Diet. Today we've discussed your most recent release, Smarter, Not Harder, the Biohacker's Guide to Getting the Body and Mind You Want. Dave, what's next for you?
Next up is I'm rolling out upgrade labs across the country. These are biohacking AI longevity centers where you can come in and spend very few minutes of time to get huge physiological benefits. And Heavily Meditated, my next book, is coming out in April.
Heavily Meditated.
Yep.
If you're interested, love to have you back on to talk about that. Dave Asprey, thank you for your generous time today and investing in all of our leaders and listeners and viewers around the world. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Scott. I'll be back on.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.